Well, it's the sixth day since the war between Israel and Hamas began. Casualties continue to rise on both sides. While Israel has lost over 1,200 lives, fatalities have crossed the mark of 1,300 in Gaza. Now let's take you to the latest details in this ongoing war. On the international front, Israel's staunch ally, United States, has sent its top official to the country. The U.S. Secretary of State, Antony Blinken, met the Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and discussed military aid. Blinken pledged rock-solid support to Israel while saying Palestinians had the legitimate aspirations not to be represented by a militant group, that is Hamas.
The message that I bring to Israel is this. You may be strong enough on your own to defend yourself, but as long as America exists, you will never ever have to. We will always be there by your side. That's the message that President Biden delivered to the Prime Minister from the moment this crisis began. We know Hamas didn't commit its heinous acts with the interests of Palestinian people in mind. We know Hamas does not stand for the future that Palestinians want for themselves and for their children. Hamas has only one agenda: to destroy Israel and to murder Jews.
Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu also compared the Hamas militant group to the ISIS. Listen in.
Hamas is ISIS, and just as ISIS was crushed, so too will Hamas be crushed. And Hamas should be treated exactly the way ISIS was treated. They should be spit out from the community of nations. No leader should meet them. No country should harbor them. And those that do should be sanctioned.
The Israeli president also spoke about the escalating situation earlier on the ground. Let's listen to what he had to say.
I met the families of the hijacked and kidnapped citizens of Israel. It was extremely tragic and extremely painful. So many people live in a reality of a nightmare, not knowing the whereabouts and the real facts of their loved ones.
Well, on the battleground, reports now say Israel military is preparing for a possible ground invasion into Gaza, although it is yet to get a green signal from the government. At the same time, a blistering air campaign has continued. Israel says it aims to take out the group's senior leadership. The Prime Minister vowed to crush them and destroy them. Over 5,000 rockets have been fired from Gaza since Saturday. In the Gaza Strip, hospitals have been overwhelmed. Thousands of buildings have been destroyed and entire blocks razed to rubble. Over dozens have been killed in Gaza today as well. Talks are ongoing with all parties, including Egypt, to open a humanitarian corridor and the Rafah crossing between Gaza and Egypt's Sinai Peninsula. But Israel says there will be no humanitarian exceptions to its siege until all its hostages are, safely back from Hamas. The international community of Red Cross is also in contact with Israel and Hamas about the hostage situation. Dozens of foreigners have been killed, taken hostage or wounded during the attack on Israel by the militant group Hamas. Israel says a total siege would continue on the region as it remains cut off from food, medicines and fuel supply. When it comes to the domestic front, setting the differences aside, Prime Minister Netanyahu announced a unity government with opposition leader Benny Gantz. A war management cabinet has also been established to deal with the crisis at hand. Let's listen into what Idan Roll, the former deputy foreign minister of Israel, had to say about the new government.
So the thing about Israel is, and it's, it never ceases to surprise me, despite having lived here, all my life. We know how to put differences of opinion aside, even the harshest ones, and to come together, even in this time. And Israel is united behind one cause only. We need to strike back Hamas and make sure that this doesn't happen again. We must make sure that Hamas can no longer be a threat to Israel. And everyone is behind this. So we're putting politics aside, and that's not an easy thing. I'm a politician, but we understand that That's the main goal, and that's the only goal right now. I can assure you that after the war is over and we have won, and we will sit down and make sure that we investigate any possible flaw or mistake done by anyone in this country that is related to running this country or its security, national security, and we will make sure that we fix it.
Meanwhile, on the war front, the threat of infiltration from Iran-backed Hezbollah from Lebanon border continues to be there. Syria also has claimed that Israel has struck Damascus and Aleppo airports. This as Israel came under fresh attacks on its northern borders from militant groups in neighboring Lebanon as well. And, well, we are now being joined by Sergei Sumleni, who is defense expert and director of the European Resilience Initiative Center, live from Berlin. Thank you very much for talking to us this evening. Let me begin by asking you this question. We heard the U.S. Secretary of State, Antony Blinken, speaking just a short while ago, saying as long as America exists, there, we will back Israel, we will deploy the largest aircraft to the Mediterranean, while Netanyahu says that Hamas is equal to the ISIS and must be crushed. No nation should be talking to them, no leader should be talking to them. This essentially leaves no room for de-escalation, something that, leaders in the region are talking about. What do you make of America's decision to arrive in Israel for talks and also talk about deployment?
Well, we know that there is a treaty between the U.S. and Israel on bilateral support, and the United States is legally binded to provide Israel with military support in a case of an attack on Israel. And what we have seen recently with this full-scale attack by Hamas on Israel, this attack was unprecedented for decades. There was no such level of attack since decades, since 1973. And the number of that on the Israel side and the scale of violence, people were not just killed. We know that they were brutally killed, they were beheaded, we had seen children being killed, women being raped, bodies having been demonstrated to public, and these murders have been celebrated. So the level of this attack remains actually no choice for the United States being binded by this treaty to provide Israel with all military support they can. Regarding the de-escalation, it is of course a question: how can you de-escalate a situation? And having from the side of Hamas even seen the level of attack, the level of violence.
Right.
It is those who work with conflicts, they know that you first need to strike back and then try to de-escalate. You cannot de-escalate when one party unconditionally escalates.
Right. But, the larger question of this is coming at the back of the Ukraine war. America, in a sense, is weaponizing every war. Can the West really afford to do this, given that there are Arab nations in this region? This could become a larger regional crisis as well. How do you see this panning out?
I agree. We clearly see a rise of conflicts of unprecedented scale. We see the full-scale war in Ukraine since 15 months, the largest war on the European continent since the Second World War. We see now this war between Hamas and Israel, but also in other regions, look at the Balkans. In the Balkans, tensions between Serbia and Kosovo are rising, and Serbia clearly demonstrates its readiness to attack Kosovo, or at least demonstrates its army being gathered on the border of Kosovo. We can also imagine other regions starting to burn, think what will happen when China will try to attack Taiwan, or something else happens. Of course, there are limits for the Western resilience, and there are limits of Western response. That was exactly why many experts like me said that the Western reluctancy regarding Ukraine, what the West called controlled escalation, was false. We had to react massively and rapidly on Russia's aggression.
Right.
Now we are facing war on several fronts.
Right, and there are, of course, unverified reports that the Hamas may have freed one mother and two children The Israeli side has not confirmed this, but do you think that the Hamas is under some sort of pressure now that the Gaza Strip has been completely cut off?
I think, yes, they try to evaluate now how they do further, because the level of their attack was unprecedented, and the reactions must be exactly as that, because Israel has no choice, no government will survive if they do not respond massively on such an attack. So now Hamas must think, like, wait, what we do further? Like, how can we get out of this? Because those who raped women, who killed children, will probably not survive. But what about the organization? How can they come to some sort of deal? Before, the strategy of Hamas was to have like some sort of a balance between attacks and kidnapping, but also like presenting themselves as a party which is ready to negotiate. Now Israel doesn't want to negotiate anymore with Hamas, so they need to find the way out. But once again, I could have imagined that Hamas would have attacked Israel and kidnapped a lot of people, try to negotiate further,
right,
like for release of prisoners, etc., which was standard strategy. But
right,
after this mass killing, I don't see the room for negotiations.
Right. I do want to briefly ask you, though, and lastly, that will the West put any pressure on Israel to have a humanitarian corridor out of Gaza, because it is becoming a humanitarian crisis for the civilian population there?
I think, yes, I think that is a question, because nobody in the West questions the right of Israel to attack Hamas in the Gaza Strip after what Hamas has done. But of course, everyone is questioning what is happening to civilians, to children, to other like unrelated people. And here the question should be addressed not only to Israel, but also to Egypt. Like Egypt doesn't let Palestinian civilians to exit the Gaza Strip since years. So that is a question, but of course, after that, there is a question: how can you discriminate between civilians and Hamas members? Because of course, any Hamas member can say, "Okay, I am a civilian. I want to exit." Israel is afraid of infiltration from the Gaza Strip.
Right.
It's a complicated question, but I don't know how this question will be solved. We also know what has happened today in Syria, when Israel Air Force bombed Damascus airport and Aleppo airport reportedly. So this story is not over yet. It is just the beginning, I'm afraid.
Right. I'm afraid, as you're pointing out rightly, this is just the beginning, not the end of this war, and there will be more consequences and, of course, more casualties going forward as well. Sergei Sumleni, thanks very much indeed for joining us this evening.
Thank you so much. Thank you.